You are now in the Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. I am Lucas Kaplan, writer for NetsDaily, covering who else the Brooklyn Nets. Also of Nets Film Focus, we make some great videos, insightful X's and O's stuff on the Burrows basketball team. And of course, joining me is Sarah Kustok down in Miami, covering Unrivaled one-on-one, covering the Nets, doing it all. Sarah, how are we doing?
Good. Excellent writing. Excellent coverage. Excellent breakdowns, Lucas. You gotta. We love reading your stuff and watching your breakdowns.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
Also, I am doing excellent as well. All
Okay, good.
around excellence.
Good. I felt like you yesterday. I went for a run. It was 25 degrees.
Ooh.
I felt like you.
Well, if you were like me, fortunately my run has been like 80 degrees these days. But no, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You really bearing through the cold there.
I know. Well, I was like, I can't show up and face you being a huge wimp. So I powered through it.
I respect that. Partner,
Yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah. And hey, we almost didn't ask you back because, you missed the last.
Good luck. I know. I was
I'm
wondering. I
just-
was waiting for Richard to tell me that he was gonna take over and just start doing the podcast.
He hasn't said anything to you yet? He hasn't teased you about that yet? That's shocking.
Ready to pop on?
That is truly shocking because Sarah was doing Unrivaled last week. I hosted solo, and the Nets were 2-0. And now she's back this week after the Nets played 4 games, all at home in the past 7 days. And they went 3-1, bringing them to a nice total of 5-1 in their last 6 games. This will come out on Wednesday, and Wednesday night the Nets play the Sixers at home, and then they'll be at the All-Star break. So, almost no matter what way that game goes, Brooklyn has some real momentum heading into the break. Obviously, another win would be nice. But 5-1, when you're waking up after Unrivaled, when you're loading up the film, what are you seeing that is driving this team?
But it's like sitting right next to me, Lucas. I feel like I've continued to watch it both during and after. It's been so much fun to watch. I think we've seen different iterations of this group throughout the course of the entire season. But the resiliency, I think the resolve, and more than anything, which I know you got a lot of numbers to dig into, the defense. And so much of their success, their wins, their stretches where they are finding areas of dominance has come on the defensive end. And I think that it's interesting thinking back to preseason and to training camp and Jordi Fernandez talking about how he wanted the team to play the type of pressure defense and just being locked in terms of connectivity and coverages. And that has been on display in full. It hasn't mattered who's been in the lineup, what things look like. I think we're seeing all of those things come together in the sense of just how engaged everyone is. I think now too that we're past the trade deadline and everyone knows this is the group, this is the team, this is how we're going to move forward with things. I also think there's a level of just maybe relief or composure that continues to show. But overall, I think that's been the hugest part of it. And just a group that continues to play for one another and just play extremely hard.
I think that is pretty indisputable how hard they're playing. And I do think, the vibes of just the feelings of being secure post-trade deadline, it's hard to quantify, but how could you not be impacted by it? Media got to speak to Cam Johnson, who's obviously floated in a lot of rumors, just noise, around the larger NBA landscape leading up to the trade deadline. And he was all smiles. We talked to him actually at a Friday morning shoot around, so 12 hours after the trade deadline had passed. He's still in Brooklyn, and just, you're one of your best players, your leaders, kind of just is emanating these very positive, smiling vibes, happy to be part of the team still. That has an obvious trickle-down effect. One, just, piece of news, buttoning up things, should have led with this. Nets bought out Ben Simmons last week, so now the roster, you would imagine, is really set. Obviously, a couple more things could happen, but the guys they got are the guys they're rolling with. They're playing hard, and they're playing great defense. In their last 6 games, this 5-1 stretch, they're first in defensive rating. They're first in block shots per game, and there's more numbers. There's first in field goal percentage. Really, any way you slice it, they have been the best defense in the league for about 2 weeks now. But even going back before that, they came home from that West Coast trip that ended in Oklahoma City 10 games ago. And over those 10 games, they're the second best defense in the league. So it's not just the smallest sample size possible in this winning streak, that we're looking at. It is an overall effort. And free throw rate for the opponents way down. They're third in turnovers forced per cleaning the glass over these 6 games, first in effective field goal percentage. So I just think they're executing, and I think it makes sense that it took them a couple trades, a couple months, but it does feel like they are more connected than ever. At least that's what I watch. That's what I feel like when I'm in person. I don't know if you see the same thing, on film.
Yeah, because I also think just watching how they continue to communicate, watching the communication from the coaching staff on the bench, and you bring up players. I think across the board, even when players have been injured or not playing, you bring up Cam Johnson still with the team.
Mhm.
Thankfully, and yeah, of course, everyone thrilled to have him around. But the communication on the bench of different guys helping one another, even those within the game, I think all of those things circle back to the buy-in, the gate engagement, and the game plan discipline
Mhm.
each and every night out. And so for those reasons, like that's exactly what you look for. Cause I think sometimes when teams struggle, so much of it does circle back to the defensive end. And I think in that same vein, uh, they have also not allowed any missed shots or times they're stagnant on offense. Sometimes that can affect you on the defensive end, and
Right.
whether it's mentally, whether it's just it presses you quite a bit. And I think they've done a really nice job in making sure that their foundation starts at the end of the floor.
So I want to ask you a question because you hear, and I think it'll be insightful because you hear players and coaches talk all the time about being locked into the game plan and understanding coverages and whatnot. And, for me, and I think a lot of fans, you might wonder, well, what goes into that besides obviously pick and roll coverage is a big one, right? You want to know if you're switching, if you're trapping, whatnot. But certainly, defense as a whole in the NBA is more than just how you're guarding the pick and roll. So Day'Ron Sharpe said it post game, in Brooklyn's most recent win, a Monday night win over the Charlotte Hornets. He said, we're really just understanding the coverages. You hear those words a lot. So what are some examples? You don't have to get too specific, but like, what does that mean beyond just, hey, like we're going to trap LaMelo Ball or we're going to go under this guy in it kind of a grander sense?
I think the biggest part of that is everyone else. And so when you're talking about, for example, pick and roll coverages or
Mhm.
trapping or what you're doing with the ball screen, whether you switch, other actions or other off ball screens, what is everyone else doing? And I think that's where breakdowns happen most often
Mhm.
for teams is the rotation on the backside. Where's your low man going? Who's the next pass away? Are you most concerned about taking away the middle of the floor, taking away the baseline, taking away that weak side 3 point? There's so many quickness of rotations off the pass and off when guys do get blitz or do get double team. We've seen more of that, and the angles of things
Mm.
like those, if you're blitzing, if you're hedging, if you're whatever you're doing, there's small nuances that I think this team is continuing to understand and learn, and that's the details of it, of exactly where you need to be, because we use the word connectivity, and a big part of that, if there's one breakdown, if there's one player out of place, if there's one movement, that can bust up your whole possession. And so I think just in terms of that, of understanding the coverage, it's not just about, okay, you're going to go under on this player. And
Mhm.
we talk so much about knowing your personnel and knowing tendencies of the opponent, but it's not just, okay, we're going under on this guy, we're going over on this guy, we're going to trap this. No, no, no. It's where is everyone else to make sure when those players make those passes or make those plays or get to the middle of the floor or potentially beat someone that they weren't supposed to, is everyone else in position to respond to that and to counter that? And I think that's where you've seen so much progress from this group.
Yeah, there was one possession in the Miami game last night that in my memory jumps out in terms of what you were saying. And it's unfortunate because Tyler Hero made a tough pull up shot, but it was pull up 14 footer off glass. It's the type of shot you want to force guys into. Tyler Hero's an all-star. He made a tough shot. But, the Nets hedge, kind of trap at the level. Bam rolls to about 15 feet, something like that. And Nick can't recover to him on the speed of the pass. So the low man, it might have been Cam Johnson, steps up and takes Bam. So now Nick is in no man's land, right? He's finding someone to guard. His teammates point him to the opposite wing. And as Bam kind of turns around and gets into a handoff with Tyler Hero, dribbling up court, Nick takes the initiative to fall back to the corner guy. So now if there's a play at the rim, now he's the low man and Trendon's up at the wing. And you talked about angles. The Nets this is what's really stood out to me. They're funneling drivers towards the sideline and into the rim protectors. So Tyler Hero, instead of being able to drive to the middle of the floor, is forced into the kind of the short corner towards the sideline. And he ends up making, a 15, 14 footer off the glass. But if he were to go to the rim, Nick Claxton, that's who you want protecting the rim. And he started the play, at the top of the key above the 3-point line. So to me, that was communications. It was angles. I posted another similar play in the home victory against the Rockets from 3 wins ago. But stuff like that, really just, you see it in all the details, as you mentioned. And I think the interesting thing about when we talk about funneling drivers and making sure when you're closing out, you're taking away the middle, is the Nets are first in blocked shots over these last 6 games where they're 5-1. That doesn't just reflect Nick and Day'Ron and like the traditional rim protectors, but to me, I think it kind of reflects the perimeter defense too. Like they're forcing guys towards the right spots. I don't know. You don't typically think of block shots as like a perimeter stat, but to me, I think it's, a statistical example of what you're talking about. I'm not sure if you've noticed that as well.
Yeah, you said it. And one is where you're forcing guys to, and 2, it's still maintaining your position, whether it's off the hip, whether it's coming from the understanding of where your big is going to come from and allowing them to have that striking and timing. And that all, Lucas, as you brought up earlier, circles back to the lower free throw rate by opponents.
Yeah.
And so a big part of that is positionally how we're looking. So all of it tied together is something to me that's been really, really impressive with that fact.
So because their initial positioning, their initial work is good, they're not being put in, disadvantageous positions where they have to foul. That's an interesting point. I also do think there's a bit of reputation going on where now that they've established this league-wide rep as a team that plays really hard and brings it every night, they are, have plummeted in foul rate in a good way. At the beginning of the season was all they fouled a lot, how to be physical without fouling. I think it's human nature. The officiating crews are respecting the Nets as a team that plays hard and is physical in the proper ways. And so, you build cachet that way. But I shout out the perimeter defense to then bring it to Brooklyn's finest. If you're a new listener, this is an award we give out every week to just guys we want to shout out for that week. A lot of candidates in a 3-1 week, obviously. And, for you, 2 weeks ago, they're now 5-1. But I do have to give it to, I think, Nick and Day'Ron. I'm cheating a little, bringing up both big men.
Like it. You can pick one and I'll pick the other because I'm right there with you.
I'll talk about Day'Ron. I have a couple stats pulled for him. I mean, just, you get 48 minutes.
You got all the stats.
I do have all the stats. You have the eye test, which I think is more important. I maybe I use stats as a crutch, but Day'Ron, man. I mean, they're in total they're getting 48 minutes of really solid center play at night, and that's just like a life raft for any NBA team. 48 minutes of just consistent presence in the paint. But with Day'Ron, man, I feel like I talk about him every week. He just gets better and better, and he, in his 4th year in the league now, per NBA.com, opponents are shooting just 56% when he's the nearest defender inside the paint, inside 6 feet. That is of 58 centers the NBA's tracked, 19th. So he's in the top third of the league. And just as, a point of reference, his last 2 years, he was at over 62%, field goal percentage allowed. So I think it matches the eye test. He's going up vertical. He's blocking shots. Some of his timing, is great. He has these flashes where he's taking away cutters and doing his work early. And as he continues to cement himself as a really valuable big man in this league, that is a skill of his that is not only boosting his value, but it's part of what has made the Nets this really awesome defense over the last couple weeks. So that's what I'm seeing. That's the biggest thing I'm seeing from Day'Ron. And if I were to point to one skill, why I'd give him Brooklyn's finest. So I'm curious to see what you have to say about Nick. I'm sure there's
Well,
some
you got
overlap.
some numbers on Nick. What do you have? Where are your numbers on Nick? I'm gonna let you get to those first. You're on a roll.
Oh man, my numbers on Nick are that he is still in the top upper echelon of defensive field goal percentages allowed. So he's in the low 50s, and you get close to names like Rudy Gobert and not quite Chet Holmgren, but guys like that. His finishing over the last month has really rebounded on the other end. That's what I've noticed. He had a bunch of 4 of 13 or like 4 of 12 games, mid-January, early January. Now he's up to like 8 of 11, 7 of 12, and he's really finishing inside at the rates that we expected him to. And so that, just again, a two-way presence on both ends for me.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to Nick in particular, and Day'Ron, I feel like we've talked about, and as we should, of him coming back, how he's guarding the perimeter, his movement, everything picking up. When it comes to Nick, I felt like there was certain stretches at that early part of the season. He even admitted it to where he
Right.
understood he needed to be better. He needed to be more impactful, and that was both ends of the floor. I think one, you're starting to see that defensively, and two, on the offensive side, you do have to acknowledge there's been a lot of changes
Yeah.
in the point guard role and who he's playing with and what the offense looks like, where he's getting his shots from. And sometimes it affects bigs or would affect a player of his skill set differently than it would others. And I think that's why we've applauded this team so often of their just versatility and how they continue to adapt to what the lineups look like, who's available, and everyone has been a part of that. However, I think Nick is one player that may affect most.
Right.
So one, I really like to see that and how he's continuing to create that chemistry. And the last thing about him, I don't know how many weeks ago, I don't have the game, I don't have the numbers, you may, but there was points that his frustrations was evident on the floor, and whether it was picking up texts, whether it was flagrants, whether it was injection. And it feels like he made a conscious decision to try and channel those emotions in different ways and not respond necessarily in ways that would hurt the team at certain junctures of the game. And I think you've just seen an added level of maturity, and that leading to leadership, and that leading to things that this team has needed. So really just impressed with that type of evolution here for him throughout the course of the year.
Yeah, I completely agree. He scored in double figures in 5 of his last 6, 7 of his last 9, like after having a few games in single digits. And it was a lot of that in between period where they had traded Dennis Schroeder, but not yet acquired D'Angelo Russell. So I think that stretch of the season hurt him. He didn't have a pick and roll operator. But I loved his offense, specifically against Charlotte last night. They switched a ton. And so Nick would go down to the post, he'd seal, try to create an advantage, get offensive rebounds, just all the little things. And I really, really credit him for kind of changing the momentum of his season in the middle of it. He could have waited to All-Star break. He could have said, I get a week off, that'll be my time to lock in. But he did it just middle of January. And so big props to him for that. He could be our next net, who we're really watching moving forward. But I'm going to turn that over to you. I don't know if you have somebody in mind. Who are you really watching over, the next, I guess they only have one more game for the break, but in going forward?
I think we should be very excited about Trendon Watford and
Yes.
just how he's developed, how he's played. And coming back to, I think, I don't want to say he was a forgotten injury casualty early on in the season, but because he got hurt in training camp and didn't really play at the early part of the season and then had that little bit of a setback, I think the injury list had been so long in so many cases that you kind of forgot the impact that he could make. And he has shown that. He has shown that very much so throughout the course of this last 5-game stretch, 6-game stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think the areas of you stress, and again, I know you always have these numbers, but in terms of taking care of the basketball, how he facilitates, what he sees on the floor, and reining it in a way that he can do so in a really controlled
Mhm.
environment, while still being aggressive, while still being assertive, and kind of picking and choosing when he should have that scoring mentality and when he should continue to find teammates. And that's part of the evolution that think we've seen out of him. And I think you forget, and we've said this before about Keon Johnson or a handful of players. Like, he's still young, he's still gaining experience. You got to have patience sometimes with players, to understand that that's part of it when you get consistent run and consistent time and inconsistent roles. And I think he's someone who lately has absolutely taken advantage of that.
I love that the Nets have committed to playing him as this big jumbo ball handler. He had this mishmash of skills coming into the league, and the Nets said, you know what, this is what you are, this is what you're good at. We're putting the ball in your hands, and we're going to let you go through growing pains. And Trendon Watford said it yesterday after the Charlotte win. He's like, this growth is just part of year 3 to year 4. I have a consistent role. The Nets are 10-7 when he plays. They have won their last 5 games, this 5-1 stretch. He only missed the Washington loss, played all 5. They are a different team when he comes off the bench. He snagged that backup point guard role. And the big question with him last year was, hey, if you're going to be this big primary ball handler, we need you to shoot some threes because you can shoot, but it's just about getting them up. And we need you to curb the turnovers a little bit. Against Charlotte, 4 assists, no turnovers, 3 of 5 from 3. 3-pointers are way up. He's taking 27% of his shots from 3. That's almost double his previous career averages, and his turnover rate is the lowest it's ever been. So small sample size, but if those things continue, you have a really fun jumbo guard. And I'm glad we talked about some of the Nets' offensive stuff they've shown in the last week, but man, is it really about the defense? And it is fun to watch, and whoever tells you they don't play defense in the NBA no more, tell them to watch the Nets. It is the first time that they've allowed under 90 points in 2 consecutive games since their initial season in Brooklyn, which was, of course, as you know, 2012,
Wow.
2013.
Yeah.
They did it actually in 3 straight games in March of that year. And so what was the starting lineup in all 3 of those games? I believe this was also your first year with the team.
It was.
Okay, good. I'm glad I got this.
So, Galen Williams,
Correct.
Joe Johnson,
Of course.
Brooke Lopez,
Indubitably.
Chris Humphries.
No. It was
Oh,
March. It was late. They made a little bit of a change at the power forward
Gerald
position.
Wallace.
Gerald Wallace, yes. Yes. That's
But
your
that's
4
not
for
who you're
5.
talking about.
That's not who replaced Chris Humphries in the lineup.
That wasn't. I don't think they would be. That wasn't the Reggie Evans here, was it?
Oh, of course it was. Of course it was.
This is very exciting for me.
I'll give that's a 5 for 5, even though you kind of said it very, you kind of suggested
Maybe
it.
I forgot that was Chris and yeah, no.
Yes.
Well, I didn't. For some reason, how many years did Reggie play with the Nets?
He had the 2 years. He had the next year as well.
Yeah,
and the
I feel like the
reason-
next year was felt more. I think that's why I was hesitant.
Yes, he came on at the end of that year. Fun Reggie Evans fact: the Heat won the title that year. It was a lockout year. Reggie Evans said the next year, "Hey, they won in a lockout year. Doesn't mean anything." He didn't quite say that. He said he put an asterisk on it. A lot of trash talk. Nets went 4-0 against the Heat that regular season against the Heatles. Don't ask what happened in the playoffs. Shout out to Reggie Evans. It's my guy forever. And this is your Brooklyn Nets podcast forever, I hope. Presented by Ticketmaster. Big shout out to them. Big shout out to Sarah. Doing Unrivaled, watching 3-on-3 basketball, 1-on-1 basketball, making time to watch 5-on-5 film.
I'm excited and this drops tomorrow night. I'm excited to get back and be sitting there watching live.
Some 5-on-5.
Some 5-on-5 Brooklyn Nets.
Hey,
Brooklyn Nets, baby. Fingers crossed, Lucas,
Right.
that I'm not a bad luck charm now.
Yeah, they better win on Wednesday night, as usual. But if they lose, we'll have an easy target to blame. No offense. No, we want you back. Everyone wants you back. Maybe not Richard. I'm sure he's going to give you a lot of hell. But that about does it for us. Episode 15, Vince Carter's jersey number. watch From Daytona Beach to Brooklyn. It's the documentary. We were all at the premiere at the Paramount Theater last month. It's a fantastic documentary. By the time this podcast is out, From Daytona Beach to Brooklyn, Vince Carter's story will be out on YouTube. Every Nets fan should check that out. You know I already have. And that about does it for us. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Like, subscribe, rate us, whatever it is. We'd appreciate it. And have a good week. We'll see you next time.